Hey guys, another one take review, and as you can probably guess by the childlike look of excitement on my face and my giddy schoolgirl smile, this is an album that I've been waiting to talk about for a while. That album, of course, being Father John Misty's Chloe in the Next 20th Century. I'm a massive Father John Misty fan. I've been looking forward to this ever since it was announced, or at least hinted at with some cryptic posts on his Instagram, because he had to be the moody artist and make it all dark and ambient and cryptic. And I mean, ever since Fear Fun came out, when he debuted the Father John Misty name, I enjoyed that record. And I Love You, Honey Bear was amazing. Pure Comedy is one of my favorite albums. And God's Favorite Customer was solid too, as well. And each of those are distinguishable records that sound different from one another, but are all equally solid releases that I would highly recommend to anybody who's not familiar with them, or maybe familiar with them but just hasn't heard anything off of them. But my point is, I was kind of waiting for Father John Misty to maybe fall off a bit in terms of quality. I know there's some people that argued that his Anthem Plus 3 EP was kind of a sign that he wasn't exactly in the same excellent creative space anymore, what with it being covers and whatnot, but you know what? Those two Leonard Cohen covers that were on there were absolutely amazing, and they stack up against the originals. And you know what? I was just waiting and thinking, Chloe in the Next 20th Century, is this going to be the one that, starts his downward spiral after four great records? And it's not. The first thing that you're bound to notice about Chloe in the Next 20th Century is its very big band-esque sound, which is very theatrical in style. I'm not saying that this sounds like Father John Misty covering the soundtrack to Oklahoma or anything like that, but it definitely is a bit more dramatic than previous releases, which is kind of impressive in the grand scheme of things, considering that Father John Misty is arguably the melodrama king of the modern singer-songwriter scene. However, this new sound that he's adapting on this record, as well as that combination of this new sound with his previously established sort of self-aware, ironic sort of persona, makes for a very interesting album that is, again, very self-aware and very just uniquely Father John Misty. There are a lot of artists that could definitely pick up a sound like this, but no one could execute it in the same way. The way that Josh manages to sort of deftly weave between tributes to the big band era of what we consider to be early contemporary music, as well as a sense of sort of post ironic, modernized old time music, is something very impressive and 100% completely him. The layering of subtle humor and sort of self awareness and self recognition aside, anyone who doesn't think that a song like Buddy's Rendezvous isn't just the pinnacle of smokiness and suaveness probably don't understand what those two words mean. This is Father John Misty at his most clean cut and smooth while maintaining the biting persona that defined his previous records. With that being said, this actually might be Father John Misty at his most tender so far. In a way, you could argue that this record actually sort of goes back to the pre-Father John Misty days where Josh was releasing albums under the name Jay Tillman instead, his, actual name with his first name abbreviated, as it sort of shows a bit of romanticism and honest emotion that is at times clouded by the Father John Misty persona. While albums like Pure Comedy were busy talking about the wildly different perspectives of different political parties and, being as cynical as it possibly could, and I Love You, Honey Bear was talking about horrible breakups that were as hilarious and comedic as they were emotionally devastating, Chloe in the Next 20th Century decides to not really address any of that, at least not directly. Instead, it just goes for an honest, upfront sense of emotion, which is maybe a little too rare in the Father John Misty discography. From the second that this album's first single, Funny Girl, was released, I knew it was going to be something a bit more raw and tender as far as emotional capabilities go compared to previous Father John Misty releases, but it's nice to see that songs like We Could Be Strangers actually follow up on that concept throughout the entirety of the album's runtime. And don't think that Father John Misty is getting overly sappy or unnecessarily sickly sweet on this record. He still delivers some amazing songwriting. Josh is notably less straightforward in terms of his phrasing here, choosing a lot more metaphor and a lot more specific imagery compared to previous songs. It's long gone are the days of, being bored in the USA or finding that disappointing diamonds are the rarest of them all. And while those songs were layered in their own respective metaphors, Chloe in the Next 20th Century has a lot of songs that go beyond that. I couldn't even tell you what the semi-titled, self-titled track is about, even though it's gorgeous and maybe my favorite off of the album, or second favorite off the album. But then there are other songs like Q4, the album's second single, that are just basic, straightforward storytelling. So it's that mixture of strong metaphoricalisms and strong imagery that really define this new sound, this new image, and this new overall even presence for Father John Misty. Most of Chloe in the next 20th century's flaws, which it does have, are mainly very minor things. For example, a potential highlight of the album, Kiss Me, I Love You, was kind of ruined by this sort of distorted vocal work that they layered over Josh's voice that just really doesn't work, even if it does make sense. It attempts to create the tone of a drunken lover, which is fine and that's dandy, but at the same time, it really does take away from the very just smooth, classy instrumental that I feel like really defines a lot of the record's best moments, like Funny Girl, and it actually makes what could have been one of the best songs on the album the weakest song on the album, even if I still do like it a lot. Also, really, there's a little bit of mixing issues here or there. The mixing of the vocals is kind of awkward at times. Maybe he's a little bit too low. The instrumentals being focused on a bit too much. This is a Father John Misty album, after all. Even if I do really love the instrumentation and aesthetic choice here, I really think that his voice and songwriting should come first. But nonetheless, those are pretty much too minuscule for me to really go into depth about. But nonetheless, there are some minor flaws throughout Chloe in the next 20th century. So, overall, I really love Chloe in the next 20th century, but I also do think it's going to be a very polarizing release within the Father John Misty fanbase. While he has experimented with other sounds before, I mean, there's a little bit of electronica on I Love You Honey Bear, etc., etc., a little bit of garage rock on Fear Fun. I still do think that this is maybe the farthest that Josh has ever gone in terms of switching up styles. This big band experimentation and this new sound that he's, I'm assuming, producing for at least a little while longer now, as well as a bit more blunt but also imagery and metaphor based lyricism at times, is definitely something that a lot of people might not be used to from him. Nonetheless, maybe it's just my Father John Misty fanboyness coming out. Maybe I'm just being a regular person about my age that is charmed by any bearded man that can write a good song that's snarky and witty as well as just slightly endearing. But I think this was a great listen, and I'm going to give it 4.5 stars out of 5. That jazz instrumentals and the vocal jazz kind of style that carries a lot of the album were very gripping to me, and I thought it was a very interesting choice. And again, it won't be for everybody. If you found yourself really in love with I Love You Honey Bear, I can't guarantee you'll even remotely like this, but I would still highly recommend it and give it a shot, even if you aren't entirely sold on the overall concepts that I've mentioned here throughout this review. But nonetheless, 4.5 stars out of 5, and with that being said, that's the end of this review, and I'll see you guys in the next one.